We preserve our forests, protect them from being overrun by dangerous plagues, disasters, or even ourselves. But what else are we protecting? What else lies in wait within the cover of those trees? Well, something horrible, apparently. These are two allegedly true scary stories that happened in or near national forests. If you have a scary story and you want to hear it on the show, share it with us at darkstories.org. I'd love to hear some stories about alien encounters and supernatural stalkers. Also, I apologize for the short and infrequent uploads as of late. I've been under the weather due to some intestinal issues, but I'm hoping to get that figured out and taken care of soon. Now, let's begin. Werewolf Sighting from the Mad Miller. In spring of last year, there have been reports from sheep farmers along the Dutch-German border, especially in the eastern Dutch provinces and way down in the southeast of the country. These shepherds have reported several cases of their sheep, and on some occasions even their sheepdogs, being slaughtered, but not eaten. These cases have been on the news several times, for if the killers would have been wolves like many suspected, they were displaying some off behavior. Namely, wolves don't just kill their prey and leave it behind, nor would they consider fighting one or several sheepdogs on a normal occasion. And lastly, they would never invade human territory, especially not on their own. Not to mention the territory was being guarded by dogs and electric fences in the meadows. Still, there have been reportings of sheep and sheepdogs being killed, and sometimes being partially eaten. In the southeast, there were 11 sheep, 6 of which were lambs, slaughtered, but left untouched beyond that. There was no trace found of the killer, save for the deep tooth marks in the torn throats of the dead sheep, as well as one paw print with a length of about 7 inches. After those killings, there was a period of silence, until there came new reports of the killings in the east having been done by wolves. This was said to have been confirmed by DNA tests coming from the bite marks on the dead sheep. Roughly a year later, there is now a small pack of wolves living on the biggest Dutch national park, Veluwe, and there have been no more reports of sheep being killed, not in the news anyway. The killer of the 11 sheep in the southeast has also been confirmed to have been a wolf, but this was never supported by DNA results, or further arguments other than young wolves that are looking for a territory to kill sheep on farms to show other wolves who's boss. But this contradicts the statement that wolves wouldn't dare to approach human settlements guarded by dogs and an electric fence. It was all quite suspicious. I loved going into the woods at nightfall, so much so that I've done it at least 3 times this year, though visiting a forest after sunset or before dawn is still illegal here. I would often take a short walk right before sunset and leave when it was almost completely dark, wearing dark clothes, so the foresters or creepy people would not spot me easily. I don't know why I'm addicted to hikes, especially nocturnal hikes in the woods. I felt a really strong call of the wild, if you'd call it that, ever since the first time I went off trail in the summer of 2017. When I go out to visit the woods, either going off trail or not even the time of day matters. I'm always energetic and excited about it. I would even dare to say that I wanted to go hunting at some occasions. I would feel the urge to hunt when I'd see a deer or rabbit run by, but I've neither a license nor weapons, so I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to do any of that. A few weeks ago, as of writing this, at the start of autumn, I went for another night hike in the forest. I had to bring my flashlight since it was cloudy and rainy outside. As always, I went there on my mountain bike, chaining it to a pole before I'd set off into the darkness between the trees. I saw the last people walking back to their cars and homes as I walked into the opposite direction. It had become completely dark when I made it to the middle of the forest. I silently enjoyed the cold, the scents and sounds of the woods, and I had nearly forgotten about my encounter in these same woods almost 2 years ago. After having set myself down on a wooden bench nearby, I heard the faint bleating of sheep from about 200 meters away from me. I stood up and began to walk in the direction of the noise, mostly because the bleating sounded rather distressed, as if the sheep were panicking and trying to flee from something. I was already surprised that I could hear it from that far away anyway, but what surprised me at least just as much was that I could smell the scent of the sheep as well. The wind was blowing in my direction, but still, I didn't know I was capable of this. I should mention it's quite normal to encounter a flock of sheep here in these woods, as local shepherds have their sheep stay in several places to control the weeds growing there. One day you might find them on the moor, and the other day you'd find them stationed near the bank of a lake. A low, fairly easily removable makeshift electric fence would hold the sheep from wandering off and losing the flock. Tonight, the flock had been placed on a small moor about 200 meters from where I sat on a bench. It took me some time walking toward the pen before I could see the sheep, as the flock was hidden by bushes from my direction. Though what I saw when I arrived at the pen kind of shocked me, because not only were the animals running around frantically, trying to escape, but there were 2 slaughtered sheep lying in a small puddle of blood. I could see that their throats had been torn open by jaws that seemed bigger than those of a dog, or even a wolf. There were no signs of the fence having been touched, though. What I did notice were a scramble of enormous canine-looking paw prints around the sheep's corpses and around the pen, as if the killer had carefully been walking around at first, meticulously choosing its prey before stepping inside and making its move. The sight was, of course, shocking and terrifying, but weirdly enough, not for me. I wasn't as shocked and scared as I'd expected myself to be. Instead, I felt more frustrated. Frustrated about someone or something having been roaming around in my woods, causing a disturbance. I had begun to see these woods as my second home. As much of a reckless idiot as I was, I decided to follow the tracks. I was curious to see who or what was roaming the forest at night. If I wouldn't have known better, I would have realized that I might have just been walking into the jaws of death soon enough. I kept following the huge tracks until the trees surrounding me made the environment hard to see. I changed my mind as I could no longer see much at this point, the trees blocking out pretty much every possible light entering my eyes. So I whipped out my flashlight and shone it around, while I could still hear the sheep panicking in the distance, just maybe 55 meters behind me. I was suddenly on edge again when a new scent hit my nose, a scent which seemed to be a mix of wet dog and fresh blood. This would soon be accompanied by footsteps on the forest floor, calm steps, as if something was walking up to me to check me out. I directed my flashlight toward where the scent and sound was coming from, and what I saw first were eyes, gold yellow eyes, about 4 feet above the ground. Now this already meant that whatever it was bigger than a dog, bigger than a wolf even. I froze as the beast stepped closer, and at this moment I could make out its face and front view of its body. It was similar to a wolf, though in proportions slightly bigger and sturdier. Its fur was dark on its back and lighter on its belly. It even seemed to have a short, dark mane on its neck. The animal appeared to be staring at me cautiously, but it didn't seem to be aggressive yet. From the blood on its snout, I could tell that it must have been the beast that killed those sheep. And now, I was indeed scared. Any sudden moves or panic that I could not control could mean the death of me. It wasn't like I stood much of a chance against a beast this big. Still showing no aggression, the creature came closer until it stood about 5 meters away from me. Then, as I stood there watching in utter awe and silence, the creature stood up on 2 legs, like a bear, now towering over me at about 7 feet in height. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I took a more sturdy, defensive stance. I had to constantly remind myself not to show fear. It leaned forward a little and sniffed the air to smell my scent. It then perked its ears up, seemingly more suspicious of me. All I knew was that the bigger you appear to certain creatures, the less likely you are to be attacked. But no matter what I did, this thing would be looking down on me. Still, I tried to make the best of the situation, trying not to look intrigued or scared. This, as if by some miracle, seemed to work. The wolf-like thing stepped backward slightly, breaking eye contact with me. I took a tiny step forward and tried to look defensive or territorial. As I appeared to have the upper hand now, I did something ballsy. I spoke to it, trying to sound fearsome and demanding. "My woods. Get out." Again, I was genuinely surprised that this happened to work. The beast turned its head away from me and growled softly, what seemed to sound like a protest. It then went down on all fours and turned around to disappear into the darkness. Before it completely vanished from sight, it gave me one last awfully human-looking glance, its eyes reflecting the beam of my flashlight. As soon as I could no longer see, hear, or smell the wolf, I let out a sigh of relief, so loud that I was afraid the wolf would still hear me, and that it would come back. Only then did I start shivering, my mind and body at once realizing I had just survived a life-or-death encounter with an animal beyond the normal. Something that reminded me an awful lot of a werewolf. Cold shivers poured down my spine, and I grew a little nauseous when I was suddenly startled by a piercing but distant howl coming from behind me. It was both beautiful and haunting, reminding me of the howl from a game I used to play called The Hunter Classic. The sound chilled me to the bone, and all I wanted then was to get the heck out of those woods, back to my home. After about 20 minutes of speed walking back to my bike and continuously looking around me and pausing, cautiously peering into the darkness at every sound I heard, I made it back to my bike. Quickly, I unlocked it and raced home. Back at home, the realization hit me again. I might as well have been as dead and torn up as one of those sheep. When I calmed down, the questions started coming in too. Why didn't it attack me? Why did it react like that when it sniffed me? What's also strange is I haven't heard anything in the news, even the local news, about the slaughtered sheep I discovered. It's as if it never happened, with perhaps even the shepherd completely denying that his flock lost 2 of its members to a supernatural predator. All I know is that I won't be telling anybody in my family or friend group about my experience. If it comes up in the news, I'm sure people will just think it's a wolf, just like it happened with all the other sheep killings in the Netherlands over the past 2 years. And I'll be quitting my nocturnal walks in the woods for sure, because next time I encounter something like that, I may not be so lucky. Lights in Coconino National Forest, from ATLhoodrat. My husband and I moved into our camper van back in October, and our first stop was to visit family in West Texas. then move on to Arizona for a music festival. After the festival ended, we decided to hang around Tucson for a bit and see the gem and mineral show before heading north to Flagstaff, then to the Grand Canyon. While heading to the Grand Canyon, we found an awesome boondocking spot in the Coconino National Forest. It was on this small Forest Service road that only had 2 spots on it, and one was occupied by a man and his young son, who I assumed were spending the day in Sedona, about 45 minutes away, and retiring early to their RV. We snagged the last spot before crossing, which was awesome. It was perched up on this hill that had been leveled at the top. You could see all the mountain ranges surrounding you with the ranch fence next to us. The ranch was over the next mountain in the valley. There were wild cattle around, and the landscape was absolutely breathtaking. I spent most of my day just staring out at it. It's an extremely remote place as well, which we love, because we love stargazing and privacy. We go to bed early most evenings, around sunset, waking up around sunrise with a middle-of-the-night bathroom break. We woke up and walked outside for our bathroom break, and could not believe the stars. They looked wonderful. We went back to bed and agreed to stay another night, just to see the stars again, even better. The following day we spent listening to music and rock hounding and taking in the landscape. I kept looking at this one particular ridge, telling my husband that a bright light was shining on it, almost like a strobe. He looked and it was gone. It wasn't something I thought of until I saw it a few times again, and then I became concerned. As a wilderness first responder, maybe there was a hiker out there who was stranded on the ridge, trying to get our attention. But the areas that the light came from changed, much too often for someone to be traveling by foot or bike. Later that evening, after we made dinner, we sat outside watching the sunset and decided to go back in the van to hang out while it got dark out. Then it would be dark enough to really see all the stars and the Milky Way. It was around 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. We came out and I immediately looked up. There was this light that was so bright white, and it seemed close. I asked if that was the North Star, and if so, how could it be so bright and close to us? My husband said he wasn't sure. We kept walking around our site looking at the sky and the satellites. We went around the van, then back to our original spot and looked up. Immediately, we noticed the light was gone. But then we began to notice the light again. It was moving further away. It was a different color now, too. It was moving rapidly. It would jump around almost like a hummingbird, but changing color between yellow, red, and blue. I've seen a lot of different phenomena in my life, so I wasn't particularly worried or shocked, especially since we had just seen the Marfa lights, which looked similar, but with more flowing movements. That all changed in the next few moments, when the light began to change colors into monochromatic ranges of deep violet and violet blues with magenta. It was almost peaceful looking, soothing. It started moving closer to us, changing colors more often. Blues, violets, pinks, greens. It came down to the ground level on the other side of the large juniper. I lost my breath at that point. The juniper was only a short distance from us, and at this point we noticed that it was literally peeking at us from around the juniper, just as we had been peeking at it from around our van. It moved so much, I guess the way to describe it, it was like a curious child, and it seemed like the light would have been where the face was, and as tall as an average male. All of a sudden I realized how close we were to seeing it, and I became afraid. Because I don't think I was ready to see it. It's like a big question that's about to be revealed, and are you sure you want to know the answer? You can't go back. The box would be open. I may have made a noise or jumped back when the fear set in, and this light thing did not like this. It got very low to the ground, almost cat-like, and was looking through the bushes. Immediately, it began to pulsate red, the color of aggression. It scared the heck out of me, to be honest. We ran back to the van, jumping in and locking the doors. Our van has this bubble wrap mylar insulation in the windows, which we put up in the winter months to keep in the warmth, so we couldn't see out of them. At that point, I didn't want to. I was horrified. I couldn't catch my breath. After we finally calmed down, we decided we needed to look. What person wouldn't? We got out to inspect. Where the light had been before now seemed empty. This was a relief, but it also made me wonder if I was making the whole thing up. Then I looked to my left, just beyond the fence to the ranch. I noticed several of the same type of lights moving back and forth in greens and blues. They were pretty far away, so I wasn't so worried, and I felt a bit more calm about the situation. They were far away enough. For some reason, I turned towards the ridge I'd been looking at earlier that morning. I thought I saw something larger moving in the dark. Of course, I told myself that I was just crazy, to disregard it. And at that moment, a bright light came on. But it wasn't a light. It was a creature of some sort, very similar to something you would imagine from movies that depict alien beings as robots, or wear robotic machines. This machine was large and clearly visible. It was shining a light into the valley where we had just seen the blue and green lights. It flashed a couple of times and then was gone. All the other lights were gone shortly after that, and did not come back that night. I wish we had thought to grab our phones, but the first one happened so rapidly that it didn't at all occur to us to record it. Though there was quite a bit of strangeness in the photos I had taken during the trip. Well, this brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't worry, more scary stories are on the way soon, so stay tuned. If you have scary experiences and you want them narrated, share your stories with us at darkstories.org. If you want to support the show, like and share this video, and check the links in the description. Until next time, here are the credits from my patrons who donate or have donated. Remember, stay safe out there, and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.